happened awfully quick, actually, for me. In a matter of 3 weeks, we went from initial symptoms to surgery. And the initial symptoms were really pretty vague, and it was almost by accident that the neurosurgeon that we knew decided to do an MRI, a brain MRI, and found the tumor a few days after we had called him and had seen him in his office. But even when I saw him in his office, I wasn't exhibiting any signs of having an issue. And so from the time I saw him in his office to the time we heard about the tumor was a few days, and then a few days later I was starting to lose feeling in my leg. But we met with the neurosurgeon the following Monday, 3 days later, and he suggested that it was non-malignant. So going into surgery, I certainly myself didn't believe that it would be malignant. And the surgery was supposed to last till about noon, and I guess the first sign of bad news was that the surgeon came out early and told Karen that it was not good, that it was malignant, and I had a short time to live, really, and to kind of prepare things accordingly. Well, when I woke up and came to, I really didn't know what had happened, and still, had no feel for whether it was malignant or non-malignant. However, when I woke up, I was paralyzed down my right side, so I suspected something wasn't right, or something didn't go according to plan, or at least what I thought the plan would be. And then later that day, my wife came in and told me that it was malignant. Came in with our neurologist and gave me the news, because the neurosurgeon didn't want to give me the news until the next day. But Karen knew that I suspected something was different than what I was expecting, and so she wanted me to know what had happened and what they suspected, what they found through the surgery. At the time, the surgeon told us that about 90% of the tumor was removed, but he feared going for any more than that because of the location of the tumor was so close to the motor stem that controls the motion on your right side of the body. And so I think it was within 5 or 6 days, we were flying down to Duke to get the initial consultation and enter their program for treatment. I was still pretty uncomfortable at that time. In fact, the hospital didn't really want me to go that soon. They wanted me to recuperate a little bit more before I went down there, but we felt that the sooner we saw Duke and got the consultation and got treatment started, the better off we would be. So we pushed it 3 or 4 days ahead of what the Kettering Hospital wanted us to do as far as leaving. They had the biopsy of the tumor that was, I guess Johns Hopkins is a national center for reading these biopsies of the tumors, and so they had that. They had the slice of the tumor, and they had the initial, I guess, prognosis or type of tumor that it was, and that's what they had initially. And so based on that, they were suggesting a initial treatment of chemo and another drug called Avastin, and along with some radiation. And we were to start that, I can't remember now, but about 4 weeks after the surgery. And that was what we were going to start then with Duke. And then just the day before we were to start that, we already had our chemo and the drugs already ordered and ready to go the next day. And they called back, and they had taken another MRI, I think it was 4 weeks after surgery. And in that MRI, it appeared that the tumor was not as bad, not as big, and not engaged with other parts of the brain as they first thought. And so it was actually good news that it wasn't as progressed as they initially thought. And so they decided to change courses on the treatment plan, and actually we were able to skip a major treatment phase, which was kind of a pre-treatment with the Avastin, and move on to chemo and radiation right away. At that time, they didn't tell us what the second step would be. They said they had several options, but they wanted to see how I handled the first treatment, which was basically 6 weeks of chemo and 6 weeks of radiation. And then based on the results of that, they would decide what my next course of treatment was. So I came through that pretty well, and they felt then that I was best suited for a different clinical trial, one that uses a drug that also tries to cut off the blood flow to the cancer and has a little extra chemo in it, in addition to more of the chemo drug Timidar. And so they suggested that maybe a 12-month phase of treatment that they were very hopeful that would clean up or stop the growth of the cancer. Well, again, I'm probably fortunate so far in my treatment in that all of the chemo has been oral, which is much less aggressive or abusive to the body than going intravenously. And so I had, for the 6 weeks, I had the Timidar chemo drug in pill form every day, and then I had targeted radiation on my tumor that lasted, was every weekday for 6 weeks as well, and handled that pretty well through the first 4 weeks or so. But then the buildup of the chemo and the additional radiation, created quite a bit of fatigue. But within a few weeks, I was able to, get my strength back, and I was feeling pretty good at that point. And then, based on where they thought I was at the end of that treatment, then they suggested the next course of treatment being Timidar and this experimental drug XL184 for a 12-month period, which would be 5 days of Timidar every month, first 5 days, and then 14 days of the XL184. I'm in now. Next week I'll be starting the third cycle of that treatment, and we asked why we were picked for that particular clinical study, and it's the first time they're doing it for non-reoccurring tumors, or actual first tumor incidents, and they just felt that I think it was some combination of where my tumor was at that point, my health, and maybe even my attitude, that they thought I was a good fit for this study that they felt was very promising. And so we agreed to the clinical study. This phase of clinical study, which is a phase 1, and they're calling it phase 1C, is actually an attempt at determining what's the maximum tolerable dosage of this XL184 that most people can tolerate without being too sick or having other side effects. The effects have been pretty minimal. There has been some cramping in the hands, which is one of the side effects, and some stomach issues, but they've been pretty minimal as far as we know, or I think in comparison to what we had heard some of the side effects could be. So we feel pretty good about the ongoing treatment that we have right now.